What's up guys? In this video, you're going to learn how to play poker to your strengths. Now this video was inspired by a conversation I had recently on the Mechanics of Poker podcast, where myself and the Wacko were interviewing Clanty, who is a high stakes cash game regular, does lots of coaching videos for Run It Once, and is an all-round crusher. Now, what he said in that video really got me thinking about the ways we learn poker and the importance of building your game around your strength. So one of the things he said early in the conversation was he would not have been successful in poker without solvers. Without solvers, he feels like he wasn't a good fit for poker and he wouldn't have been able to succeed. On the flip side, we had the Wacko, who was Rene from Poker Ambition, and he's a very creative, exploitive player who functions very well without solvers. He does good with solvers as well, but his way of learning doesn't require solvers initially, all right? And this got me thinking about how certain players can play the same format, the same stakes, reach the same objectives, but build their games fundamentally very, very different, all right? And I've worked with hundreds of players myself. I've seen this many, many times where there's different strengths that players have, and you need to build a game around the things that you're good at, all right? So we're gonna use a spectrum and a few kind of avatars to highlight how the importance of playing to your strengths, and hopefully this will give you guys some directions to go in, or if you're already doing the right thing, to double down on playing to your strengths and building your strategies around the things that you are good at. So first of all, we have Clanty on one side, and he defines himself as very logical. So we'll call it like the logical analyst on one side, someone who likes to have systems, they like to know solutions, and in a poker context, they're going to do very well by studying GTO. All right, by studying GTO, using solvers to see how strategies play out. Also by using data and having inputs where they can basically replicate, or they can see how things work and their mind can follow along in a very systematic way. So if you're a very logical person, you're going to do great learning poker through solvers is your kind of predominant method, or some form of data where you can actually use the logical part of your brain to follow along to certain systems. All right. From there, once you've got good logic and good understanding of the concepts, you will then start to exploit from that framework. All right, I'll come back to this concept in a second, but you basically want to base your knowledge base and your game overall on some solid fundamentals, all right, some sort of GTO concepts, all right? Then on the flip side, we have the very creative person. I would call them the creative artist, all right? And these players are generally going to play very exploitative. They don't need to know what the GTO looks like. They are going to use their feel, their intuition, and they're going to come up with strategies on the fly. All right, so these players would have done very well pre-solvers. I'll talk about how they will do even better post-solvers in a second, but generally they're very good at just coming up with strategies to understand feel-wise how things play out and to come up with their own novel solutions. And they enjoy that. They love being creative. If you put a creative person into a GTO framework and tell them only learn GTO concepts, they would hate it. They wouldn't do well at it, and they would not be able to learn effectively, and they would very quickly start to hate poker, all right? So if you're a creative person, you want to tap into that creativity over and over, all right? And then I'll talk about a third person, who is the engineer. All right, so we've got logic on one side, we've got who's GTO, we'll call them the logical analyst. We've got the creative artist, who's the exploit player. And then we've got a kind of third player, who I say very often, who is the engineer. And engineers love to build things, all right? They like to, they've got really good logic, so it's like the kind of cross between the logic and the creative side. They need logic to build out a system and build out a kind of path and a strategy for themselves, but they also like being creative. Once they know the rules and the boundaries, they like to use their creativity to come with novel solutions. And I've had a few conversations which have brought out these engineer characteristics and a few high stakes guys recently. One that comes to mind is Zinhao, who is with the Brazilian poker crew, who are one of the biggest stables in Brazil, one of the high stakes players in the cash game format. And he talked about his love is building strategies. He likes to build businesses, he likes to build strategies, he likes to build his own approaches to solving poker and to basically coming up with novel solutions. And it's not so much the end result for these builders. Obviously the end result is good because you get to profit from them, but they like the building process. So these guys are going to do great in the lab studying with solvers, but also using their creativity and spending time away from poker, basically building stuff, all right? Giving yourself time to build, not in the game scenario, not at the tables, but taking time away. And I recently had a conversation with Patrick Leonard, who goes on the line name Pads, who a lot of guys will know, one of the top MTT players in the world for many, many years. And as of the time I had the podcast with him, he was away for 2 months, completely off the grids, trying to come up with a strategy, a new strategy for the next series, the next W Coop and Scoop series, where he basically wanted to condense everything he's currently learned, how he thinks about spots, and come up with build this whole strategy of how to approach every single spot, right? He was in the engineer phase. He was engineering a strategy. He loves that. He wants to do that. You couldn't pay him to do that. He wants to do it because it's very enjoyable. All right, so let's have a look at how these 3 different personalities will spend their time, and they will learn poker different. They will have a different strategy, a different approach to poker completely. They might cover the same variables, but they'll cover them in a very different order. All right, so the logical player, like I said, will generally start with some solvers or data, and they will have lots of inputs on how strategies and how systems work. They will then try to stretch those boundaries and be creative. They'll try to use what they know fundamentally to stretch the boundaries and come up with exploits around their fundamentals. However, generally, they'll refer back to solvers and data to see if their exploits were correct. So imagine you've got this very structured game, you'll deviate from that, and then to check if your plays were correct, you'll come back to the solver as a baseline, a piece of mind. So you stray back, but then come back, always returning to this solid understanding, all right? And when you are deviating, you want to know, am I deviating too much? Is it I'm pushed too far? Can I get away with that? And you're always going to come back. Generally, in this context, you'll use solvers to check if you're deviating too much, all right? So this player will do that, and then that'll reinforce the logic. So it's more logic, then needs creativity, and then that creativity goes, okay, was I pushing too far? Okay, back to the more fundamental logic systems approach, all right? Then we've got the creative player. They will generally use exploits all day long. They'll be as creative as hell, and then they'll use solvers to make sure their strategies are GTO approved. All right, so Rene the Wacko is a really good example of this. Hyper successful prior to solvers, but he said solvers had a great impact on his game because now all his crazy stuff that he was doing, if you guys watch his YouTube channel and his expert videos, he's got a very outside the box approaches to his strategy, and he could then use a solver to see if they were solver approved, if the solver agreed or completely disagreed with his methodology. If it was completely wrong and he couldn't find any context that the solver would use it, he would go, I pushed it too far, and he might rein some of those in. But overall, he's been creative. He's using the solver to make sure he's not straying too far, and then he uses that information from the solver to be more creative. Because once he knows how the mechanics work and how poker is functioned from a kind of systems point of view, he can then exploit that more and more. All right, so you see the difference there. The logical person's always just going outside the bounds, then coming back. The creative person's completely playing Wild Wild West and then using solvers or some sort of framework to check in. Some creative players, very exploitive players who are very confident in the game, don't even use solvers. They don't even come back to the base because they're so confident in their players. All right, I'm not here to say which one's better, which one's worse, but like examples from the past, you had people like Isildur, who would be an amazing exploit player, very field-based, using obviously very good pattern recognition as well, but he's generally picking his game based on exploits, not in the lab on solvers. So for you, you've got to think out which of the types of players you are. Are you someone who works very understanding frameworks and then building your game around that, like Clancy? Are you someone who likes to exploit like crazy and you enjoy being creative and you would want to have like kind of more creativity in your life and more flexibility to create strategy on the fly? Awesome. You want to build your game around exploitation and use solvers and kind of logical thinking as a baseline to come back to. And then you could be the engineer. And if you're the engineer, you need to spend more time removed from both playing and studying. I'll say studying as like the day-to-day studying and creating strategies, building strategies. If you're an engineer, awesome. Spend time a month at a time building a strategy, building a solution to a complex problem that other people aren't doing. All right, so very fascinating, this kind of playing to your strengths approach. The more I've been speaking with players, I wanted to put this video together for you guys to give you guys multiple avenues to be successful. So in my opinion, the logical player, the creative player, and the engineer can all crush poker. They can all play very high stakes. However, I'm going to use a quote from Pads, who said in the podcast interview with us, he said, be a good version of yourself rather than a bad version of somebody else. All right, so that means play to your strengths. If you're a logical person, don't let a creative person tell you that you're being too rigid. If you're a creative person, don't let a logical person tell you that you're too outside the box. And if you're an engineer, spend time building. All right, if you build your life towards your strengths, yes, you're gonna spend some time on your weaknesses. This isn't also black and white. You're not 100% logical or 100% creative, but logic and creativity are kind of separate. So for example, the left side of the brain is generally the more logical. So we've got hemispheres, cut it down the middle. The left hemisphere is generally more logical. It's more active during logical tasks. And the right brain is more creative. So even when if you're someone who's more of a logical person, you're using your left brain more dominantly. And if you're someone who's more creative, you're using your right brain more dominantly. It's not a good or bad thing. You can be successful if you play it to your strengths. You'll enjoy poker more, you'll learn better strategies, you'll be a better version of yourself by playing poker to your strengths. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Drop below if you're the logical analyst, if you're the creative artist, or if you're the engineer. I'd love to know in the comments if this resonated with you. If it did, make sure you smash the like button before you go, hit the subscribe button and the bell so that you get my future video notifications. There's gonna be more videos coming from me very soon.